Everybody loves a little bit of tea. MMA is a business that thrives on rumors, ridiculousness, and revelations by the athletes, the promoters, and anyone associated with them. Fans eat up new and interesting information about their favorite fighters like it's candy covered in more candy. But especially so when it's a shocking new bit of info never before discussed. The type of confession that rocks us to our very core, or at the least dominates the MMA news cycle for a few days. Today we're going to be looking at 10 times fighters were feeling froggy enough to spill the beans on some aspect of their career or life and had us fans feeling a bit shook. Let's see what everybody's been hiding. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and this is the 10 most shocking fighter confessions. Number 10. Colby Covington's gimmick. This may come as a surprise, but Colby Covington didn't enter the UFC wearing a MAGA hat and an interim title with a trail of adult models behind him smacking food out of nerds and virgins' mouths while spoiling blockbusters. Much of the persona Covington has adopted today was a conscious decision to improve his career. Colby has said as much on several occasions, for instance when he was on Brennan Schaub's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Another aspect of the origin story, going at least as far back as January 2019, is that the UFC was going to cut Covington after his Damian Maia fight.
Before I fought the number 2 guy in the world, this guy named Damian Maia in Brazil, they had told my manager, Dan Lambert, that they weren't going to re-sign me. They didn't like my style.
But he called Brazil a dump and lived happily ever after. The most notable version of this confession came recently on internet person Candace Owens' show when Colby laid the whole thing out.
When I really took over this bad guy character that I've kind of taken in the UFC, I really enjoy hearing people tell me I can't do something and tell me, that you will die.
Now, we at MMA On Point have already pointed out that Colby actually started his gimmick before he fought Dong Young Kim, as well as refuted his story that he was about to be cut after the Sao Paulo fight. But while Colby may at times be an unreliable narrator, the fact that he chose to break kayfabe, as they say in the wrestling business, and reveal that a major part of his persona is a gimmick is pretty shocking considering he's been so dedicated to portraying it at all times. Number 9. Ali Abdelaziz was poisoned. Manager to about 973 MMA fighters, Ali Abdelaziz is a regular on the Ariel Helwani show, and in February of 2019, the decision to interview him so often became worth its weight in gold. When asked by Ariel about then challenger Kamaru Usman and whether Ben Askren was in his head, wow do things change quickly in mixed martial arts, the controversial mega manager responded, and I say this in my best Chris Penn voice from Reservoir Dogs, out of the fucking blue, with this tasty confession.
I was poisoned in bed. I was dying, right?
Poisoned? What do you mean poison?
Yeah, somebody tried to kill me.
That's not exactly something you just throw into casual conversation. Someone cut me off on the way to Starbucks. Hey, did you see that new Star Wars movie? Someone tried to poison me to death, but I cannot be killed. Ali didn't care to elaborate much further, although he did add that people have been trying to kill him for years, so no biggie.
Listen, people have been trying to kill me for years, but I'm still alive.
That's right. Jeez Louise.
Unfortunately, nobody has bothered to look further into this story beyond this one interview, so it's unclear what actually happened and whether anything else came of it, like, I don't know, someone being arrested for attempted murder. So this one will always remain one of the unresolved mysteries of mixed martial arts. You know you said some wild shit though when the craziest thing you said during an interview wasn't that Tony Ferguson doesn't deserve a lightweight title fight. Number 8. Conor McGregor's due date. One could argue that Conor McGregor was at the height of his powers directly after UFC 205. He'd avenged his loss to Nate Diaz, he'd won a second world title at the first UFC New York card since the ban on MMA had been lifted, with the biggest gate in the history of the company, the Mayweather fight, less than a year away. There was a lot going on in the champ's life, including as he would announce at the post-fight press conference that he was expecting his first child.
I won't announce when I'm going to be a daddy early next year. So, thank you.
The theme of the 13-minute presser was very much centered around how much his son's birth could possibly affect his life, as he wasn't sure where this new phase would take him or how it would alter his career. He mentioned becoming a father in nearly every answer to a question during the press conference. So naturally, a reporter followed up to ask when the baby was due.
Can you say when the baby is due?
March, I think. About March, is it? May.
March, May, the guy just had a fist fight and both of those months start with an M. It could happen to anybody. All jokes aside though, Conor's other confession that he was nervous about the whole fatherhood thing was a very human moment from a guy who at the time felt damn near invincible. Number 7. Nick Diaz's unpaid taxes. Nick Diaz had lost the biggest fight of his life against George St. Pierre in the main event of UFC 158 when he began taking questions from media members at the post-fight press conference. In the cage, Nick told Joe Rogan he was considering retirement, and during a follow-up question at the presser related to his future, he dropped this bombshell on everyone seemingly out of nowhere.
You know what, I've never paid taxes in my life, I'm probably gonna go to jail. That's not because I don't have what? You know what? Nobody wants to hear about that, huh?
Now, I'm not a CPA, but if I'm not mistaken, the US government tends to look into people who have never paid taxes in their entire adult lives. But this list is not intended as legal advice, so don't quote me on that. A few days later, Diaz's manager and coach Cesar Gracie told the media that Nick was just being wacky, fun-loving Nick, and he totally paid $100,000 in taxes in the last 2 years. But Diaz's lawyer came out after that and said that Nick left his financials to Gracie, who dropped the ball, so now he was helping him square up with Uncle Sam. Gracie denied all of this, and it's still unclear exactly how everything got resolved or how much Diaz owed in back taxes for a lifetime of fight purses, but he's not in jail at the moment, so I'm thinking things worked out because if he hadn't been audited before UFC 158, he surely was after. Number 6. Jon Jones admits to partying. Everyone is well aware that the light heavyweight GOAT Jon Jones enjoys a little bit of the bubbly, and his struggles outside the cage have been well documented here, elsewhere, and in New Mexico courthouses. The fact that Jon likes to party isn't exactly the most earth-shattering confession, but that's not truly what makes this entry so compelling. Jones appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast in December of 2016 for a lengthy 2-hour conversation. The champion was in the darkest period of his career. He had been stripped of his title twice, the hit-and-run incident was in his recent past, and he had failed the drug test to ruin UFC 200. But the former champ was determined to get his shit together, and part of that led to a very candid look into his psyche and what drove his drinking prior to fights. Jones admitted that throughout his entire career as a mental crutch, he would get blackout drunk the week before a fight so that if he lost, he could use his alcohol abuse as an excuse for why he had failed.
1 week before every fight, I would go out and I would get blacked out wasted. If this guy were to beat me somehow, I can look myself in the mirror and say that, well, I lost because I got hammered the week before the fight.
He elaborated further on his pre-fight rituals when he discussed a razor-thin decision win over Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 165.
How much did you train for that fight?
I trained for the fight, but I definitely had this thing where I just felt invincible. I did a lot of wild stuff leading up to the fight. I definitely didn't give it my all.
Jon's dark confession is just a reminder of how incredible his in-ring ability is, as is his penchant for self-destruction. Number 5. George St. Pierre's Lost Time. Joe Rogan's podcast is apparently the place to go for confessing some wild shit. About 10 minutes into an episode back in 2013, Rogan and then welterweight champion George St. Pierre had already got to discussing aliens. 5 minutes later, Rogan was explaining DMT, but sandwiched in the middle, a shocking confession by St. Pierre about a phenomenon called lost time.
Sometimes I'm looking at the clock. It's like I wake up and I look at the clock right after, and it's like the clock advanced like a 4 hour or 2 hours.
St. Pierre called his experience a third type encounter, meaning he believed these time gaps to be from alien interaction. He did posit that he might also just be crazy.
I'm crazy or maybe it really happened, but I hope that I'm crazy.
GSP's odd confession and the conviction with which he presented it caused concern that George may be suffering from neurological issues caused by head trauma. Even Joe asked GSP if these events occurred after hard sparring days, but he told him it had been happening since he was a kid. Joe then contemplated if St. Pierre was actually manufactured by aliens to be the perfect MMA fighter, and things moved on from there, believe it or not. But this is not the only alien-related story GSP has told. He also claims to have seen a UFO in Albuquerque while riding in a car with Rashad Evans and Ali Abdelaziz. Because Ali doesn't already have enough insanity in his life with people trying to kill him constantly, now he has to worry about aliens too. It's tough managing 4,000 fighters. Number 4. Darren Till's fake injury plan. Being candid during interviews is a great way to endear yourself with fans, but Darren Till took that to a different level after his UFC 244 win over Kelvin Gastelum. Till was on a 2-fight losing streak dating back to September of 2018, the first losses of his career, and both in devastating fashion. He was also arrested for stealing a cab while on vacation in early 2019. Till was supposed to be the next big thing, and now he was moving up a weight class to try and salvage his career and get back on track against a very tough welcoming committee. On top of all that, Darren had visa issues which delayed his arrival on fight week. How did all that pressure and all those difficulties affect Till?
To tell you the utmost truth, I didn't even want to go out there tonight. I was thinking of ways to fake an injury. And
I know the accent can be tough, so let me repeat that for you. He was considering faking an injury backstage before his walkout so he wouldn't have to compete. Fighters have talked about the fear before and been candid about what it's like to compete, but nobody has been so brutally honest as to very plainly state the fear and anxiety was so great that they would opt out of a lot of cash and sabotage an event, possibly ruining their career in the process just to get away from it. And yet he still made the walk. Impressive. Number 3. Mark Coleman's fixed Pride fight. Japanese pro wrestling legend Nobuhiko Takada had lost to Rickson Gracie in 2 main events in 2 consecutive years at Pride 1 and Pride 4. In the early days of the promotion, it was important that Japanese stars like Takada thrive in order to ensure Pride would become the powerhouse we knew it as. So it is widely believed that Nobuhiko participated in a fixed bout with former UFC champion Mark Coleman, who was making his promotional debut at Pride 5. One need only watch the bout to see that things are not right. After giving up position for no reason and clearly underutilizing his size and abilities, Coleman would tap to a heel hook in the second round. Mark had lost 3 straight in the UFC prior to the 1999 bout, and with very few money-making opportunities in mixed martial arts during the late 90s, Coleman accepted the fight. Almost a decade after Pride disbanded, in an interview with Jonathan Snowden, Coleman would give about as close to a confession as we're going to get in regards to whether this fight was fixed. When asked about the bout, Mark said, "It was what it was. I needed to support my family. They guaranteed me another fight after that, and I needed that security. It was what it was. I'm going to leave it at that. I think I will too." Number 2, Michael Bisping's eye. UFC Hall of Famer Michael Bisping's late career resurgence and eventual capture of the middleweight title is the stuff of legends, but things became even more incredible 2 full years after he retired, when on his podcast, Believe You Me, in October of 2019, Mike made this shocking confession along with a demonstration.
I wore my glasses, my dark glasses, as I said, to hide from the commission. I mean, get a load of this. Check this out. Look at this, baby boys. You know what I mean?
What? Michael Bisping has a fake eye. He has an eye that's not real, that can't see. Excuse me for just a moment, holy shit. Now, of course, this is massive news if, he became world champion with half his vision. Issues with the eye began after a brutal head kick KO by Vitor Belfort back in 2013, but it's unclear when Michael began using the fake eye, as he did reportedly have surgery in 2018. To what extent the eye was damaged previous to that is not clear. Even if the eye wasn't fake until recently, that doesn't guarantee he had full vision at any point after 2013. UFC President Dana White was asked about the shocking reveal and wasn't buying it.
You aren't duping the doctor. I mean, the doctors look into your eyes.
Right.
Listen, I would hope that a doctor would know the difference between a real eyeball and a fake eyeball.
But hey, Kevin Lee tricked a commission by covering up a staph infection with some makeup, so who knows? Whether his eye is only fake now or has been fake for years, the deterioration is real and likely occurred because of fighting and at some point in his career. Legend. Number 1. The UFC lawsuit documents. The ongoing UFC antitrust lawsuit that was brought forth by a group of former fighters back in 2014 has been a treasure trove of never-before-released public information about Zuffa's inner workings. The court documents have given us a look into how the UFC does business through candid text messages, emails, as well as depositions that cover how the promotion negotiates with, pays, and deals with their athletes. Some interesting revelations: how the UFC was throwing fighters who chose not to re-sign on the prelims against tough opponents in their last contracted fight, how they automatically extend contracts on injured fighters so they have a longer period of time before they must offer them another bout, as well as how their pay-per-view point structure has worked. In addition, many smaller tidbits came out in the wash, like Dana White thinking Bellator sucks at promoting and never planned on paying Gilbert Melendez a huge contract if he left the UFC. They were only jacking up his market value. ESPN telling the UFC the deal with Reebok was great for business. Pride CEO getting paid $10 million to stay out of MMA for 7 years. The UFC believing exclusive fighter contracts are vital to obtaining TV rights, and so much more. Way too much to list in just this one entry. Look for future videos on this one though, because who knows what else might come from this suit in the future. Huge shout out to Steven Jensen for editing this video together and driving the white Hummer that smashed Kevin Nash on Nitro. Follow him on Twitter at @FightTalk_. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like and subscribe. We've got 3 new videos or more for you every single week. Let us know what you thought of the video in the comments below. Follow On Point MMA on Twitter, and have yourself a wonderful day.